revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is January 7th, 2026. Welcome to the podcast. We have over 30 headlines to get through. Top of the news today, Trump's bold strategies come full circle, and the Democrats buttress their false narratives. They got nothing new to offer. The United States has come full circle after Donald Trump's first year of his second term as president, and the acquiescence to the global elite agenda, rendering the United States to a neo-feudalistic future, is over. And the Democrats double down on their false narrative, altruistic policy, fraud, and betrayal of the principles of this nation's founding. Welcome again. We're going to get to the headlines right now. As I mentioned, over 30 headlines to get through. So, let's read the news. Starting with Fox News. Iran is on the brink of collapse as protesters move to take two cities, appeal to Trump. The cities of Abdanan and Malakashi, reportedly taken over by people celebrating in the streets, chanting "Death to Khomeini." Iranian protesters issued a direct appeal for help from President Donald Trump on Tuesday as unrest continues to spiral across the nation for a 10th day. A woman's cry for help came amid reports of at least 29 deaths and more than 1,200 arrests, according to the human rights activist news agency. That also reported an escalation enforced by security units, including the use of pellet guns, tear gas, and assaults on demonstrators. What started as labor strikes and merchant protests over currency collapse and inflation has expanded into widespread street demonstrations and student protests. This is obviously color revolution. Is there internal strife? Obviously, but most of the conditions have been set forth by the adversaries of Iran. And what we have going on here now is a color revolution of sorts. Will it end in regime change in Iran? I guess one could only hope. There's issue there. What Donald Trump is going to do, this is the question also. I mean, there is an appeal to Donald Trump to do something, but whether doing something is going to be wise and prudent at this juncture is not. There are plenty of times the Iranians have rose up in protest, not to be aided by the West in any way, and their protests are crushed and people are killed, et cetera, et cetera. But today is a new day. We don't know what's going to happen there. There's talks of the Ayatollah fleeing the country and the president fleeing the country and the upper echelon fleeing the country. The turning point always is when the security forces side with the demonstrators and no longer with the leadership of the regime. So, next up, we have Cuba's long-suffering economy is now in freefall, the New York Times. With widespread power outages, medicine shortages, and rising food prices, experts say Cuba's economy has never been worse, with the crisis coming just as the supply of Venezuelan oil is threatened. Again, as with Iran, these conditions were set in motion by the adversaries of Cuba and communism, particularly the United States. The story goes on to say, by all accounts, Cuba is enduring the worst economic moment in the 67-year history of the communist revolution. Although I don't celebrate the suffering of the Cuban people, it's about time the fiscal reality of communism is brought forth. I mean, communist states can survive, if they have other people helping them. They can't stand on their own, which is a question of sovereignty, but it brings to the fore the instability, the economic instability that communism presents, period. Okay. While the island nation has endured periodic episodes of mass migration, food shortages, and social unrest in decades past, never before have Cubans experienced such wholesale collapse of the social safety net, socialism, that the country's leaders, starting with Fidel Castro, once prided themselves on. So we have a social safety net here in the United States. That's socialism. Like I said, I'm not opposed to a social safety net, especially if you live in a country of abundance or wealth, etc., that something should be provided for the people that can't provide for themselves. Should that be a middle-class living? Yeah, I don't know necessarily about that. All right, the next thing I want to move to here is a little bit of intrigue, because as you know, or as you might know, the Republican majority in the United States federal government is very slim. It's only about 3 or 4 houses, 3 or 4 seats in the House, and I think 1 or 2 seats in the Senate. So we're now approaching the midterm, and given what I said at the outset, Donald Trump and the new Republican Party, the populist conservatism, is making inroads, not just here in the United States. It's hard to push back or push through the modern propaganda narrative that Donald Trump is awful and what he's trying to do is ridiculous or stupid or dictatorship or all these other things. It's not, and it's successful. And it's going to be successful, and you're going to see economically in this year. So also on a foreign policy note, the capture of Maduro, if you look at the polling, has been well accepted by the electorate of the United States. But also globally, you're having a shift from help me, provide for me, the constituency or the electorate of countries, third world and other, to the point of just provide me with an opportunity that I can help myself. And that used to be the United States as well. That's the point, because rising tide lifts all boats, etc. The fiscal instability of communism doesn't provide that. It'll give you a handout, but it'll never really increase your lot in life, as we found out here since the 60s. Okay, the point being is the intrigue is 2 Republican House members recently, one died and one suffered terrible life-threatening injuries in a car accident, much like the bus accident that Virginia Giuffre suffered in Australia. This is a constant or a well-known tactic of assassins and people that want to do other people harm, is you make it look like an accident, obviously. And that's another thing I want to add here, is that the number one rule of criminality is to hide the criminality. So criminals don't come out and go, oh, yep, I did it. I'm a criminal. deny, 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 and cover up what you have done criminally. And so people think broadly that there's nearly not as much criminality as there actually is. So, going to this next article here from the New York Post, GOP Representative Jim Bard hospitalized after bad car accident. Revelation about Baird's accident came around the time news broke about his sudden death of another Republican representative, Doug LaMalfa, who's a Republican of California. Baird's accident complicates the GOP razor-thin majority. And this is what I'm alluding to. So one guy dies. It's a sudden death. Is it mysterious? He is 65 and he had a medical emergency and then was rushed to the hospital and died during a life-saving, supposedly, operation that was trying to save his life. We don't know the conditions of that, and we don't know the particulars of this accident. One America News has the headline, GOP Representative Jim Bard and his wife remain hospitalized after a hit-and-run accident. After their vehicle was reportedly struck in a hit-and-run, Indiana Republican Representative Jim Bard and his wife remained hospitalized on Tuesday. Their car was hit while traveling to Washington, so it was well known that they were taking this trip. It wasn't a trip to the grocery store where, honey, I'm going to run out for milk or whatever on a whim. They were both traveling back to Washington. And though both remain under medical care for the time being, his office has confirmed that a full recovery is expected. We don't know who hit his car. They were hospitalized in a very serious accident, and the other person got away. How is that even possible? How are you hospitalized in an accident and then the person that hit you gets away? Well, it takes some skill to do that, to be able to hit somebody with a motor vehicle, not disable your car, and you're able to drive away, presumably drive away. We don't know the particulars, while the other person has to go to the hospital. It's usually when that happens, that's a T-bone. So T-bones happened with Virginia Giuffre, actually got T-boned by a bus. Roger Stone got T-boned. Also, in Roger Stone's case, he was T-boned in a hit and run, which he was T-boned, hit, and the other person that hit him drove away and was never caught. Next headline. The Associated Press, farm champion Representative Doug LaMalfa of California dies, reducing GOP's narrow control of the House in a crucial midterm election. The congressman experienced a medical emergency Monday night and was taken to a local hospital where he died during a surgical procedure. The Butte County Sheriff's Office said on Tuesday officials haven't disclosed his cause of death. So these are two mysterious, and what makes these things mysterious, first of all, and sus, is that these incidents happened within 24 hours of each other. Most particularly LaMalfa in California, which is very important, is a staunch supporter of President Trump and was a go-between for the California farmers and President Trump. Trump says he voted with me 100% of the time. With Doug, I never had to call. So if you don't know anything what's going on with the Trump policy and the farmers, some of the people that export, particularly soybean and other farm products to China were particularly hurt by the tariffs. And so they were, the federal government was looking to have some tariff givebacks to the farmers. Story goes on to say, LaMalfa had planned to run for re-election despite his district being dramatically redrawn under a ballot measure passed by California voters in November. So if you don't know what happened there was a bipartisan commission that was in charge of redistricting, but supposedly in a referendum, the Californians decided not to have a bipartisan commission redraw districts and give it back to the supermajority of the California legislature, who then redrew the maps in favor of, go figure, Democrats. The measure was designed to make it harder for LaMalfa and 4 other Republicans to win re-election, but he was going to run anyway. And given recent polling, it was likely that he was going to run, not only run, but win. Hence his medical emergency. Now, I'm just speculating here, but things don't happen in a vacuum. And when things happen to benefit the Democratic Party, particularly tragic things happen to benefit the Democratic Party, I become a little suspicious. Also, talking about LaMalfa, he's probably one of the most normal people in Congress, down to earth. You want to sit there and have an iced tea with him. And the reason I put in this other quote here is because that's why it's very likely he could have won, because he is almost the exact opposite of someone like Gavin Newsom, who is so slick and greasy, he makes your stomach turn. All right, what are the Democrats up to now besides offing Republican representatives, or trying to? The New Republic has the story, the January 6th insurrectionists take a victory lap. On Tuesday afternoon, exactly 5 years since January 6, 2021, a few hundred Proud Boys insurrectionists. I got to make something perfectly clear here, is that it wasn't an insurrection. Stop calling it an insurrection. The New Republic calls it an insurrection. They use it in their headline. They use it in their lead. It wasn't a fucking insurrection. It just wasn't. The FBI said it wasn't. And that was Biden's FBI said it wasn't, because they kept calling it, the news kept calling it an armed insurrection, and pretty much you have to be armed for it to be an insurrection. The false narrative that the Democrats portrayed, that the Proud Boys were waiting with arm caches, waiting to storm the Capitol with weapons, that was all false. The falsity that the vandalism and the trespassing was predetermined and planned was false. There was another rally that was supposed to take place, and even Trump was going to be at that later rally at the Capitol, on the other side of the Capitol, that was permitted, somehow got sidetracked with this riot that obviously seemed to be, even at the time, contrived by the state, or at least people within the FBI and the security services, intelligence, etc., like that. And we're going to go into it more, and we know about the pipe bombs and everything. So just going back to the story really quickly, the insurrectionists and their supporters stood outside the very building they stormed that day and bowed their heads in prayer. Oh my God, that's awful. We know you saw us through, Lord. We know that in the darkest hours, as we stood on street corners, as we stood rotting in cells, we know you did not leave us. You did not abandon us indeed. The truth and the light always comes out, without a doubt. So it might take many years, like with the Kennedy assassination, but it does dribble out. Even the thing with it will eventually know the truth about Epstein, and we pretty much know what was going on there. But the problem is with the intelligence, anything that's if the powers that be tried to spread and foster ambiguity about something, you know the intelligence is involved, because that's exactly what they do. They don't want you to be sure one way or another. So if you didn't see this also, this is Fox News. Vance reposts sombrero meme mocking Democrats' January 6th candlelight vigil. Vice President shares images with sombreros as Dems held candles, sang outside U.S. Capitol. If you didn't see this meme, well, I won't show you the meme here, but I will show you the slide. From this weak demonstration by weak Democrats that was just pitiful in its optics. All standing out there. I think they were saying God bless America, which I have no problems with God bless America, but the way they were doing it, it just, and to commemorate this January 6th thing that they're trying to hold on to and buttress the January 6th narrative that somehow Donald Trump supporters are armed insurrectionists and dangerous. We have seen more and more violence from the left than we have seen from any conservative or populists on the right, certainly. And why are they doing this? Because in their weak manner, they're trying to wrestle away the narrative from what is a truthful narrative, what is about to come out. Just the News has a headline: House January 6th subcommittee chair says first hearing of 2026 will take place. Will take place next week. Excuse me. House Select Subcommittee on January 6th Chairman Barry Loudermilk said Tuesday that his panel's first hearing of the new year will take place sometime next week. The comment comes on the 5th anniversary of January 6th riot. It's a riot. It's not an insurrection, which saw supporters of President Donald Trump march to Capitol Hill to protest the certification of the 2020 election without investigating the claims of alternate electors. The Trump administration pardoned approximately 1,500 protesters on his first day of office. Loudermilk told Politico that he expects the hearing will focus on the pipe bombs left at the Democrat and Republican National Committee headquarters on January 5th and why it took so long for the FBI to find out who was responsible. This guy is he a patsy? He's a controlled operative. He's obviously, I wouldn't say mentally ill, but he's mentally compromised. And these are the exact type people that are targeted with nudging, mind control, influence operations, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I would like them to look into. Why the FBI took so long to find out who the pipe bomber was, because they were protecting him, because he was an agent, an asset of intelligence, whether wittingly or unwittingly. And the giveaway for me was that two things, that it looked like he was asked to look up in the sky, presumably at a satellite, and then look directly into a surveillance camera at a certain point where he's supposed to go plant these pipe bombs, but he decides to stop, look at his phone, look up at the sky, look directly at a surveillance camera, and then within a few minutes wave at a passing Capitol Police car. Not to mention this guy's political leanings or political, what's the best way to say, whether he was an ideologue or not. It certainly wasn't enough to do this. And the point I was making all along was the pipe bombs looked like they were built in the 1970s. They're not very sophisticated at all, using egg timers that didn't make any sense in the overall construction. And they're claiming that these devices were active, but neither of them went off. And we don't even know, still in the investigation, whether he had tested any of the bombs. Why would you go plant bombs if you didn't even test them? Why would you use an egg time, a 60-minute egg timer? What was the purpose? Were you trying to hurt people? He doesn't even know. It seems like he was told to do it. All right, enough of that because we're losing time here. Some good news from Zero Hedge. Goldman sees middle class outperforming, yet K-shaped economy persists. Ultimately, we expect these factors to drive an acceleration in discretionary cash inflow for the U.S. consumer in 2026, that's middle class, up to 5.1%, with the mid-income quintile to see plus 6.9 discretionary cash flow growth in 2026. So that's middle class. So anybody in the middle class is going to see an uptick of 7% discretionary cash flow, which is good. However, economists expect Medicaid and SNAP cuts to weigh disproportionately on real income growth among the bottom income quintile. So what they're saying is the handouts, the gimmies there are going to be cut. And so which means the people that do have money are going to have to use some of that to make up for the cuts in Medicaid and SNAP. That will drive the deceleration in discretionary cash flow for the fifth quintile in 2026. That's a lower income bracket. However, our economists also highlight a fragile job market with rising unemployment rates as a potential risk that could spark recession fears ahead, especially if companies increase their focus on lowering labor costs in the year as AI-led applications drive faster underlying improvement productivity. All right. Well, let's talk about this just for a minute because I just realized again that I missed. There is a headline out there. I don't think I have it in the stack today that said, was it Goldman Sachs? Shit, it was from the Wall Street Journal. I'll try to dig it up. Which was that a big company, a big financial company, was it JP Morgan? I think it was JP Morgan, is getting rid of a large swath of, I believe, productivity analysts. And this is going to be outsourced to AI. I'm going to try to dig it up here if I can. I haven't been going to the Wall Street Journal much lately because like Reuters, they're trying to lock me out of using I'm just looking for that article here. And there's talk about will stocks crash in 2026? I don't know. See if I can find that article. But yeah, it locks me out. Yeah, JP Morgan cuts all ties with proxy advisors at Industry First. The bank's asset management unit will use in-house AI-powered platform to cast shareholder votes. Wow, proxy advisors. So asset management unit will use proxy advisors. So you know what a proxy is. It's a stand-in for somebody as the power to cast votes. So is it the proxies or the advisors or both? In any case, they're getting rid of cutting all ties with proxy advisors in industry first using AI. So that's part of the issue with unemployment, obviously, is going to undermine jobs. All right, moving on. I spent a little too much time on that. Sorry about that. Just the news. Mamdani stands by tenant official who previously caused home ownership a weapon of white supremacy. Of course, they're doubling down, as I said, on these narratives like white supremacy and January 6th insurrection. And, you know, it's not fraud. It's not fraud if it goes to children. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani appeared to stand by his tenant advisor, C. Weaver, on Tuesday after she faced backlash over a years-old social media post that claimed home ownership is a weapon of white supremacy. So C. Weaver, you might have seen the video. She's seen in a video, years old. She is she's part of the Democratic Socialists of America. And what does she talk about? She talks about this communist bullshit about individual ownership of property, which is the tenet of the capitalist system, which is if you work hard, you get to own shit. You don't get to share it with everybody else. It's yours. Your house, your car, your clothes. This shared economy bullshit is more nonsense. Why? Because if you ever lived in something where you have to share everything, you yearn for a time where you could have your own shit. So it goes on to say, Mamdani appointed Weaver to lead his office to protect tenants on Thursday, where she will be focused on protecting tenants against unsafe or horrible living conditions, which is fine. You don't want slumlords. I get it. But she wrote, private property, including a kind of especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy masquerading as wealth-building public policy. You don't want to build wealth. Is that what you're saying? You don't want to build wealth? You just want to share the wealth. You don't want to build. You don't want individuals to build their own wealth, right? That they can pass on to their kids and shit like that. No, you want to share your wealth. If you have shared wealth or shared ownership, do you get to pass that on to your kids? The answer is no, you don't. Weaver also claimed in 2018 that home ownership, is racist, failed public policy. And in a 2021 speech at the Democratic Socialists of America event, that property ownership should be shifted toward a model of shared equity that changes the relationship that especially white families have to home ownership. Well, see, the thing is that owning your own home is the main avenue that individuals build wealth. So you get a mortgage, you pay your whole life into the mortgage, and you finally own your home. You're not free of property taxes, mind you. But that home ostensibly is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, that's wealth. And then if you die, you get to pass that on to your kid. And depending on the state, hopefully, if it's under, like in my state, the estate tax is if it's under 2 million, you don't have to pay any tax. State tax is the worst. And they should call it a death tax because, I mean, if it's hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars, yeah, maybe you should pay some tax, but shouldn't you be able to pass that on to your kids? So there's some debate about that. But $1 million is not a lot of money anymore, nor is 2 million. So if you have a family of 2 or more siblings and the estate is worth $2 million or less dollars or $3 million or less dollars, That's not a lot of money to the kids. I don't believe in the estate tax. That's just my thing. I mean, maybe there should be a limit, but it should be exorbitant. It's like, I think people should be able to keep a lot of their money, but if you're making tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars a year, that's certainly up for debate. Yesterday we talked about this story, Washington Times, a Craigslist ad seeking child actors for Minnesota daycare center was indeed posted as a prank. It wasn't real. New York Post, Trump cuts off $10 billion in funding to 5 blue states for child care social services over fraud fears. Trump administration is cutting off more than $10 billion in social services child care funding meant for a handful of Democratic states over concerns that the benefits were fraudulently funneled to non-citizens, officials told the Post Monday, or used fraudulently. And so if there's evidence of that, they freeze the money. I'm all for that. But the Democrats are saying, you're freezing money to kids. Well, prove it's going to kids. The problem is it goes to states, and then the states dole it out. And then the states are supposed to enforce whether the people are living up to the terms of their aid or not. And the states don't. Because once the states put it into the economy, that's how economies work. It goes round and round. So irregardless of whether it's fraudulent or not, the money goes back into the economy. People buy cars and in some cases, luxury goods, et cetera, et cetera. The Department of Health and Human Services will freeze taxpayer funds from the Child Care Development Fund, CCDF, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TAMF program, and the Social Services Block Grant Program. At least $7.35 billion in TAMF money will be prevented from going to California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. The CCDF funding block of nearly $2.4 billion affects those states. Another $869 million from the Social Security Block Grant coffers is being kept from all 5 states as well. Good. I don't care about this. People depend on this money. Well, the states should have some money, right, that they could dole out. The funding pauses were announced via letters from HHS, Administration for Children and Family Services, to each state was sent on Tuesday, citing concerns that benefits were fraudulently going to illegal aliens. These concerns have been heightened by recent federal prosecutions and additional allegations that substantial portions of federal resources were fraudulently diverted away from American families that they were intended to assist. Indeed, Tim Walz, California Governor Gavin Newsom, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Colorado Governor Jared Polis, and New York Governor Kathy Hochul were also asked to hand over comprehensive lists of funding recipients between 2019 and 2025 in most of the missives. This is the issue. That insist in the investigation and we can get this wrapped up right away. And if there's no fraud being committed, then there's no fraud being committed. The HHS Office of Inspector General found more than 6 years ago that New York City improperly billed the federal government for more than $24.7 million in child care subsidies. Well, that's the whole point. So there's evidence in all these states, and that's why these states were targeted, in Democratic states where they just insist in handing out the money regardless, whether it's deserved or not. And that's a waste of federal taxpayer dollars. So if you pay federal income taxes, presumably your money or parts of your money is going to people in the form of aid that don't deserve it. Let's move on. Stay with me now. Just the news. Feds the federal government probes hundreds of millions in suspected Somali cash and luggage leaving Minneapolis airport. What? The Transportation Security Administration flagged nearly 700 million in cash detected in passengers' luggage leaving Minneapolis airport in the last 2 years, a massive cash exodus believed to be tied to Somali immigrants and their money couriers, Homeland Security officials told Just the News. The officials said that the cash movements out of Minnesota's largest airport began about a decade ago, around the time Democrat Governor Tim Walz took office, and has grown substantially in recent years. Though we are not legally, all were legally declared according to the U.S. custom rules, the bundles of cash and luggage, some as much as $1 million in a single trip, raise regular suspicions among TSA agents. No shit. Oh, but they reported them, so it's okay. In March of last year, federal jury convicted the head of now defunct organization Feeding Our Future in Minnesota for what prosecutors called the largest ever fraud of pandemic aid, which involved $250 million. $349.4 million in cash discovered leaving Minneapolis in 2025 alone. Officials said most of the dollars detected in luggage involved a small number of money couriers of Somali descent who took routine routes to Dubai via Amsterdam, usually from Minneapolis, but other times from Seattle, Dallas, Columbus, and Atlanta. Minneapolis travelers alone had $342.37 million in their luggage in 2024 and almost the exact amount, $349.4 million in 2025. Oh, this isn't sus at all. And they go to Dubai. They're not going like to Somalia. Why? Because there are no functioning banks in Somalia. And so all the Somali people with cash have it in foreign bank accounts. So presumably Dubai, if they're going with $1 million in cash, and it looks like they're not that worried to be traveling around with that much cash. The thing is even if you declare the money, there's little trace except for that security check than if you put it in a United States bank, right? And then wired it. That money transfer could be tracked. So, and where the people got the money, was it taxable income? Nobody knows. Well, let's go into the investigation now. Fox News, James Comer to accuse Tim Walz of being asleep at the wheel at fraud hearing. The House Oversight Committee's hearing into Minnesota fraud allegations kicks off at 10 a.m. this morning, so about an hour ago. The important thing about this is it's the reason Tim Walz announced he won't be running, because he's not going to show up. He'd been asked to appear at the hearing. I don't know if he was subpoenaed, but he had been asked to appear at the hearing, and he's not going to appear. So that in itself is damaging enough. In Comer's opening statement obtained by Fox News digitally, is expected to question whether Governor Tim Walz, Attorney General Keith Ellison, and Minnesota Democratic leadership were negligent or complicit in the fraud. The fraudsters, many of whom are from Minnesota's Somali community, have stolen more programs meant to feed needy kids, provide services to autistic children, house low-income and disabled Americans, and provide health care to vulnerable Medicaid recipients. U.S. attorneys have alleged that billion more dollars would have fallen prey to fraud in the state, something Walz has pushed back on while accusing Republicans of politicizing the scandal. It's a grift. I said this many, many, many times, many, many years ago, many weeks and months ago as well. is that the Democrats' tax and spend policy, you think, oh, is altruistic in the sense is that they want to help Americans, so they want to tax rich Americans and help and give gimmies to poor Americans. It's not what it is. They tax as much as they can. They create programs that create a velocity of money, cash flow, that can then be skimmed. And then their constituents and their donors are greased, and then that money comes back to them through political donations. Story goes on, fraudsters like these take millions to enrich themselves while providing nothing, overstating or outright faking the services. How many children have gone hungry because a fraudster stole the money that was intended to provide them food? How many autistic children were denied services because of fraudsters instead sent this money overseas? How many low-income seniors, people with disabilities, or those with mental illnesses were denied access to housing because fraudsters drained resources and pocketed the money for themselves? Comer went on to say it's just the tip of the iceberg, and we've been talking about the tip of the iceberg now for quite a few days. Okay, well, that's sort of a positive note. If there's fraud happening, you want people to be scrutinizing the money that has been susceptible to fraud. More good news. Just the news. Capitalizing on positivity and zeitgeist, recruitment more than doubles at Trump's ICE. Immigration and Customs Enforcement employment has gone from 10,000 agents to 22,000 agents in just 4 months, exceeding its own goals of 10,000 new employees. The hiring surge follows the review of more than 220,000 applications submitted through the year after multiple public campaigns urged Americans to serve their country by fortifying its borders and enforcing its immigration laws. Good. So, and there are billions of dollars that are flowing into illegal immigrant removal and border security. If you didn't know, it's part of the big, beautiful bill, and all that went into effect on January 1st. And also we talked about, which deserves note, which is the tax breaks that are in there. Okay, we're getting short on time, so let's keep going. Post-millennial, Philadelphia Mexican Cultural Fest canceled due to ice fears. Without it, it feels like a sense of pride and unity is missing. Now we can just carry it in our hearts. The reality of this is, why would you cancel a festival? So basically what you're doing is you're throwing a party for illegal immigrants, for them to celebrate the culture they left to come here. So I don't understand. You're throwing a party for illegal immigrants to celebrate their culture. Why does the United States or the city of Philadelphia or the state of Pennsylvania have to fund a festival for people to celebrate a culture other than American culture? Not like a 4th of July parade or whatever. And then you have to cancel it because most of the people that come and celebrate the festival are illegal aliens. Understand? It's that whole mindset. It's that narrative that people that are here illegally somehow deserve to be here. They don't, because they're here illegally. Law. I don't understand the disconnect there. Oh, if you just do something illegal, like if I go rob a bank, which is illegal, I should be able to keep the money, right? If I can get away with it. Is that the way it works? There's no moral compromise there. Federalist, Trump's Maduro capture is a warning for China. Stay out of our hemisphere. Indeed it is. After investing billions of dollars, China's bid to turn Venezuela into Latin America vassal now faces severe setbacks. It certainly does. And the reasoning being is that socialism, communism is a conspiracy. all socialist communists work together to further socialism, communism. That's been known for years. So it's okay if you want to be a socialist or a communist. But the people that are opposed to that have to recognize that these people will do anything to further their political ideology. That they may very well be morally compromised. So they might steal, cheat to further that. And then once they're in power, they're not going to give up their power. You know, if people want to vote out, how do you vote out a communist? You don't. The answer is you don't. All right. China's deep-rooted investment in Venezuela. While Russia, Cuba, and Iran have all supported Venezuela's socialist regime, China's engagement has been far more extensive and strategic. For over 2 decades, Beijing has cultivated ties with Caracas, beginning under Hugo Chavez. Venezuela offers not just vast oil and mineral resources, but a key foothold for expanding Chinese influence in the Americas. Venezuela has become a hub for China's Belt and Road Initiative in Latin America. Under this initiative, China and Venezuela have signed over 600 bilateral agreements, underscoring Beijing's determination to dominate the region. We're going to keep moving. Stay with me now. This should be known. Communism is a conspiracy and a contagion. We have to understand that. Not that I believed in the domino theory, but there is some reasoning to that. If you don't know what the domino theory, that was back in the 50s and 60s, where we were fighting communism. I don't want to go fight communism halfway around the world, but maybe in our backyard. Excuse me. Don Rowe doctrine. Okay, moving on. New York Times, Russia sends naval vessel, it's actually a submarine, to escort oil tanker. U.S. is pursuing. The development deepens the confrontation over the tanker formerly known as the Bella 1, which the United States wants to seize, but Russia sought to protect. The development deepens the confrontation between the two countries over the tanker. The United States has been chasing the tanker for weeks after it tried to evade a partial blockade around Venezuela, while Russia has taken increasingly conspicuous steps to protect it. The tanker is sailing northeast in the Atlantic between Iceland and Britain, and its location's transponder active, according to ship tracking. The United States had a seizure warrant on the vessel because it's not flying a valid national flag, but the Bella 1 refused to be boarded and sailed into the Atlantic with the United States in hot pursuit. Then came a series of moves to ward off the United States. The fleeing crew painted a Russian flag on the hull, and the tanker was renamed and added to an official Russian ship database. And Russia made a formal diplomatic request that the United States stop its chase. By the way, none of that is legal, right? You can't switch flags. You have to be a flagged vessel from port, from origination to destination. That's maritime admiralty law. So you can't do that, but they did it anyway. And so all the Russia hawks, should say, hey, this was illegal, which it certainly was. All right, moving on. Also, big news today. New York Post, Venezuela is selling up to 50 million barrels of oil to U.S., Trump reveals. President Trump announced Tuesday that it will sell up to 50 million. Venezuela will sell up to 50 million barrels of oil to the U.S. at market price. I am pleased to announce the sale of high-quality oil. The oil will be sold at market price to ensure its use to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. But the important part here is Reuters is reporting Venezuela to export $2 billion worth of oil to the U.S. in a deal with Washington. So Reuters it's not just Trump saying it. The Venezuelans have confirmed. Moving along. Post-millennial. MAGA rejects isolationist label, embraces Don Rowe doctrine. Thank God. The MAGA right has made a clear distinction between removing a criminal dictator from his position and undertaking a war to create regime change conditions that what is in its best interest of the United States. I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to be quick here. You got to stay with me. That's why it's still early and I'm not quite caffeinated enough to be articulate. My diction always suffers. The point being is, I'm not an isolationist either. I'd like to be more isolationist than we have been in the past. But as I argued with Kat Timpf on X the other day, because on Gutfeld, not last night, but the night before last, she kept saying regime change, regime change, regime change. Not regime change. You didn't remove the regime. You just removed the criminal dictator and brought him to the United States for justice. The regime is still in place. But apparently, the Rodriguez had been talking behind the back of Maduro to the United States government, presumably with intelligence that's operating inside Venezuela. And now the security forces in Venezuela are running around whack-a-mole, imprisoning journalists and shooting their own citizens because they think everybody's a traitor now. All right, moving on. Just the news, Trump administration keeps several coal plants running, smashing predictions of the end of coal. I'm just going to go through this quickly. Coal-fired power plants in Colorado will not be shut down. They're blocking plans to shut down one in Colorado. It's supposed to keep running through March 2026. Also on December 17th, ordered the last coal power plant in Washington to remain operational on Christmas Eve. Department of Energy Secretary Wright also blocked the closure of two coal-fired power plants in Indiana. And then Wright extended an order to keep a coal plant in Michigan running. Excellent. Just the news also, Education Department's new tools show foreign funding to U.S. universities in China. Qatar spent the most. Just going to run through this really quickly. Although there are a lot of allies, including Germany and the UK and Japan, funding universities, majority has come from Qatar and China. If you combine Hong Kong with China, they jumped to second place contributor with a total contribution of $6 billion. So UK and Germany are just vassals of the communism at this point. They're socialist. They're becoming more socialist. What they're doing was the plan for the United States is they're fracturing their national cohesion, hence fracturing their sovereignty, and in the midst of that, moving to these ridiculous undermining of individual liberty there. You can't pray silently across from an abortion clinic. Ridiculous. But you got to understand why that academia is so far leftist. It's because the Fabian socialists in the UK that have basically taken over are funding universities. Germany, that has been socialist ever since the unification of East and West Germany. And, of course, China. All adding to why academia is so far left. And they're getting paid to foster and nurture this ideology. That's why people that come out of college are like, fuck the United States, man. Speaking of other sinister goings on, Fox News has a headline, Uvalde trial halted after key witness changes testimony. Former teacher Stephanie Hale's account places gunman closer to Adrian Gonzalez than previously indicated. Now, if you didn't know what this was, so there's a trial going on for the school resource officer, Adrian Gonzalez, was pleaded not guilty to 29 counts of child abandonment and endangerment following the attack at Robb Elementary School by this young, mentally disturbed person who went to the school, said, I'm going to shoot at the school. And he went to the school and he shot at the building. And then mysteriously, someone left a door open for him where he went inside. And then we don't know what happened because, again, I haven't seen any evidence of a crime. Not saying that a crime didn't happen, but I didn't see evidence of it. I still believe this was a bait for Alex Jones because it happened in Texas for him to go out there and make a scene. And this was happening during his trial, his Sandy Hook trial. So, but the point is that the teacher, Stephanie Hale, now testified differently than she had previously testified, that Gonzalez was actually closer to the gunman while they were both outside before he even entered the school through the unlocked, propped open door, which supposedly there was someone standing there when the lockdown order happened and they left the door open. Strange goings on there. But in any case, the trial has been halted because someone changed their testimony. So the defense is now scrambling. Whether this was, to me, this was an operation, how involved this security officer was in the plan, who knows? He obviously let the guy go, get into a classroom, and commit the carnage because it had to happen that way. Because if he was stopped outside the school, now if you're a school resource officer and you hear shots fired outside the school, don't you go look for the shooter? Don't you chase the shooter down? Apparently he said, no, I helped evacuate children instead. You're the guy with a gun, motherfucker. All right, there's more. So federal prosecutors released transcripts of Brown and MIT shooter admitting to murders. This is One American News. This isn't very telling. He just said he was extraordinarily satisfied. He said it was targeted, that he could have done it any time. New York Post has the same headline: cold-blooded Brown University MIT shooter expressed no regrets, but still doesn't provide a motive. So there's still no motive for this guy to do it. Apparently, he was spurned by the college or by this other professor, and we don't really know. We haven't seen that. Again, the guy kills himself, so we don't get to see any evidence. We just get to see a transcript of this video supposedly he left on his phone. Let's see the fucking video. If you're going to release this to the public, no, only parts of the transcript were released, and we still don't have a motive. Oh, ambiguity? Why is that strange? And he said he planned it for months and then apparently admitted to killing the MIT professor. And apparently he was wounded in that attack. That he injured his eye somehow. He shot him at close range and there was either a ricochet or he got some debris in his eye, or shot himself. Who knows? We don't know. We don't know anything. But in any case, he still didn't. He was found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound in a New Hampshire storage unit. So I'm not saying that there's anything more conspiratorial here, unless you want to think that the fusion scientist at MIT who was killed was kind of the target of this hit, and that this mind-controlled subject was asked to do this stuff just as a distraction. I mean, we could certainly go down that rabbit hole, but there's nothing to lead me to believe that this wasn't just some weirdo who insists he's sane. Anybody who insists they're sane, he's obviously insane to go on a murder rampage. I am, some shit like that I'm mentally ill, that is all nonsense. I am sane. Yes. Well, you're not sane. Couple notes before we close out here. Guardian, this is opinion by Margaret Sullivan. Many schools don't think students can read full novels anymore. That's a tragedy. Indeed it is. Many reasons are, including the belief that students have shorter attention spans. They do. That's all part of their online world and social media. The school's efforts to teach students to perform well on standardized tests. One factor of Common Core is a set of standards adopted in many states. Study Sync, which uses the anthology approach to introducing students to literature. That's bullshit. You have to develop focus. for you to develop any sort of intellect. You have to be able to stick with a theme, follow it through, even if it goes round and round. You have to be able to read. You have to be able to read a book. I remember when I first read my first book. I wasn't that old. I was an avid news reader for some time, but it wasn't the first book I read, but the first book I read in one day, I should say, which I think I was 12. And I was so proud of myself. I read one book in one day. I was like, "Wah." You should be able to read. You should be able to read aloud and it improves your vocabulary. It's just great for you. So if you have children, make sure you read to them and that makes them read. And obviously reward their reading. You could do your own summer reading reward program where every book they read, you give them $100 or something, if you can afford that, or $50 or $20, whatever. I missed this yesterday because this article for some reason disappeared into the ether. I don't know how that happened, but post-millennial Chrystia Freeland to step down from parliament after being appointed to econ advisor in Ukraine. This is a little confusing because it says she's stepping down from her prime minister's special representative for reconstruction of Ukraine and also from her seat in parliament to become an economic advisor to President Zelensky. This stinks to high heaven. Chrystia Freeland is a globalist, one of the top tier globalists in the world, and she's being sent to Ukraine, which really makes things even more complicated here. They're talking about reconstruction, an economic advisor to Ukraine, which just means the globalists want to get at the money they're sending at Ukraine. For what purpose, I'm not really sure. But this muddies the water. The United States needs to make a break with this crazy attempt to start World War III with Russia. More news. Zero hedge, Germany's chancellor warns of economic collapse. That's why they need World War III. Then doubles down on central planning, which is socialist. And that's it for us. How'd I do? Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Where are we? 7 minutes over. That's par for the course. I try to get it all done in an hour. It's hard when you're we're going through over 30 stories with analysis, so it's difficult. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. live stream, Rumble and YouTube. Or you can check me out on social media, Getter, Facebook, Minds, True Social, Substack. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. live stream. Respect.
Less than 3% of you people read books.
New World Order. The New World Order.
This is conspiracy. No, you know that it's a conspiracy.